Okay, welcome to your week 5 lecture. Well, at least part 1 of your week 5 lecture. So this lecture is going to get broken up into a series of different parts, probably 3 parts, 3 videos for this lecture, plus you get a video this week on the design thinking process to do in your workshop, plus there's a video this week on how ENGG1500 is going online. That one's already up, actually both of those two are already up, so you'll be able to go and watch them as well. On the YouTube channel, I'll be tagging each of the videos with a week first and then a part number. So you should be able to go through and watch them all and get everything. As it's now a YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't like and subscribe, I don't care. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about teamwork. So I generally start this off with the first question being, if somebody comes up to you and says, you're doing group work now, is that a yay or a... Normally it's the latter. So there's a few things that I want to cover off straight off the bat. If you want to be a successful engineer and work on something important to change the world, you're going to have to work in a team, okay? We're going to talk about any one situation. This one is the example. These rockets, they're reusable rockets they're launching into space, they're 13 stories high. They're a combination of aerospace engineers, obviously, but at that size, you've got civil engineers working in that team as well. You've got mechanical engineers, you've got chemical engineers, and once they start putting people in them, you're going to have medical engineers there as well. Right? Huge teams are required in order for you to be successful. So whether you like it or not, you've got to learn to be an effective team member. Now, you may notice that I'm pretty pedantic about using team rather than group. And to me, they're quite different. So I see group work as a number of equivalent people coming together, working on a problem, and they all sort of do a little bit of the same thing. My argument in that case is what it ends up with is a whole bunch of people who are all equally bad at everything. And that's not particularly useful, right? I guess this kind of stems from that project management logic of thinking that 9 women can make a baby in 1 month. It's often done quite poorly, and in reality, most people would be better off if you gave them, instead of 9 people coming together, you gave 1 person 9 times longer to do it. And as a result, it generally struggles. Group work, that is. I see teamwork as something to be thought about kind of differently, where you're bringing together a bunch of experts who are all going to do different things. In our analogy here, you've got your one woman who's actually carrying the baby, that's your expert, and then you build a team around them of people who are experts at whatever else it is that they do, and then you get a functioning team, right? Same number of resources, much better outputs. Both of them have their place depending on the project and depending on the people you're bringing together, but group work tends to have a bit of these negative connotations around it, and that is actually sort of self-perpetuating cycle that it then gets into. So, I'll talk to you today a little bit about teamwork, how it operates, some of the fundamentals that go behind making high-performing teams so that you are successful. Full disclaimer, sports. So there's going to be heaps of sports analogies throughout this whole presentation. Partly it's because this is where I A, learned a bunch of this stuff, and B, it's the obvious place to put a bunch of these analogies, okay? You don't have to understand all the analogies. You don't have to understand sports. You don't even have to like the sports for this to make sense. It's just an example explanation. So bear with me, even if I'm talking about some things you don't particularly like. So, rugby league, because, yeah. I played for a long time. I'm too fat now. But it's a very good example of where you need a team of people, all of which have different jobs. Alright? So I'm going to pick a few. This is a very simplified example for any of you who do play. But let's break our team up into forwards and backs. So forwards are your big, heavy front row people who do most of the tackling and the collisions, right? So if we put a little bit of physics to this, in a collision, momentum is conserved. So look at conservation of momentum, and momentum equals mass times velocity. It's not exactly, and energy conservation, slightly different. So conservation momentum. Mass times velocity. So you want to come off best in a big collision, you want to have high mass, right? Just how the maths works out. You also have in your team wingers or backs, people who are dexterous, who move sideways rapidly. That's their job. Generally, that's their job. So rapid accelerations. So acceleration, F equals ma, acceleration is equal to force divided by mass. So in order to move laterally quickly, you want to have a low mass. And now we've got our two contradictory phenomena, meaning we need a team. Because I don't care how good you are as a player, you can't simultaneously have both a high and a low mass, right? So both are required to build a successful team, thus we need experts. Everybody has a job to do and everybody does their job. This extends outside of league, this extends to heaps of stuff, batters and bowlers in cricket. Your netball is a better example than basketball here, but both do it in terms of attacking players and defending players. It also works in other systems, so I played a lot of Dota, a reasonable amount of WoW, stuff like that, where you're going to have carries and supports, or you're going to have DPS, healers, and tanks, and whatever else you're going to call it. This is all teams, right? Which is a bunch of people with complementary, or sometimes downright contradictory skill sets coming together to be successful. The thing the one I like most is Elon Musk can't dunk. Just to highlight, no matter how many things you are ever going to be good at, you're never going to be good at everything, and that's fine. You can still be a great team member. If we can bring these complementary skill sets together, we can then solve problems bigger than ourselves. Things that no one person, no matter how good they are, could ever do themselves, can be solved by a team. And that's what we're building towards, right? That's why the whole rest of this lecture is important. You may think that nothing I've told you here is particularly mind-bogglingly interesting, and you'd be right. It's surprising how rarely you see this logic applied to jobs or people who are doing education, like being educated, students, either in school or at university. They'll sit there and they'll whinge about their team members or their group members, and they'll whinge about the other people they work with. And I'll be like, well, have you thought about this in terms of they're playing a different position in a team, and they don't ever try to be considerate of that? So it's a thing that causes a lot of heartache, but rarely do people work on improving it. And I'm going to teach you a few different ways of improving. As a running example, there's no possible way I could do my job alone, right? So ENGG1500 has a team of, it's actually over 30 people this year helping to run it. Huge team, impossible for me to do by myself. I assembled this team of people who deliberately have complementary skills to me. Most obviously, this is technical. So I don't understand every single different discipline in great detail, so I went and made a team that's got a chemical engineer in it, and an electrical engineer, and a renewables engineer, and a this and a that, and then everything else, a software engineer. So my team has technically complementary skill sets within it, such that we have a specialist in each project. But it also has complementary personalities, and this is not an accident. So a lot of the people in this ENGG1500 team are people I picked because they think in a different way to me. So I very much know this about myself. I love starting new things, getting 80% of the way through them. Once I know the answer, they become boring to me and I move on. That's very much me. It makes me good at blue sky thinking, makes me terrible at proofreading and editing and that type of stuff, right? So that's me. I know that about myself. I know that that's a fault that I have and a strength that I have. And so then I get people in my team who are deliberately finishers such that they can finish off the stuff that I start. So this is what we talk about in terms of different roles in a team. There's a bit of soft science to this, and there's a lot of real psychology. And it's at the point now where a huge potential job opportunity for psychologists is they actually get hired by large companies to optimize their team and sit on their interview panels and hire the correct people. So huge opportunity. People like Google and Apple are major employers of psychologists now to do basically this exact stuff. So there's two really common things that you will hear about when they talk about teams, and it'll be the Belbin team roles, and then it'll be the hats. So you'll almost certainly be exposed to these in industry. I'm going to show you both. I'm not going to say that I 100% agree with either one of them. I think they both have strengths and they both definitely have weaknesses. So this is not meant to be, this is how you will do teams for the rest of your life. It's this is how millions of other people in the world do teams. Maybe it's useful. So that link will take you here. Belbin team roles. These Belbin people believe in a professional team. You have these 9 different positions that different people play. Right? So a resource investigator uses their inquisitive nature to find ideas and bring back to the team. A specialist brings in-depth knowledge of a key area to the team. That's the type of thing loads of engineers are employed as. Team worker makes the team gel. Completer finisher, most effectively used at the end of tasks to polish and scrutinize the work for errors subject to higher standards of quality control. These are all different roles or positions you can play within a particular team. You can play more than one. You could have multiple people playing any one, depending on the size of your team. What I like most about this is it's got strengths for everyone and allowable weaknesses. So somebody who's good at any one of these things should be really good, single-minded, self-starting, dedicated. That's your specialist. That's what you want, and that's what they're going to be. As a result, if you're working with the specialist, expect them to only really care about the one thing that they're involved in. So if you've got them in a team meeting that's not about that thing, expect them to not care very much. That's fine. That's still them doing their job, right? Don't be surprised when they bombard you with a heap of information. This is really good, not only because it helps you set an efficient team up, but it helps you identify strengths and weaknesses. You can go in, jump in, and there at least was, I don't know if there still is, a free little quiz thing that you can do, and it will tell you how suited you are to each of these roles. You can get a proper one done. So if you get a proper one done, you're looking at £42 each to take this online quiz. It's like $90. It's basically sorting you into your Hogwarts house, but it's a real thing, right? And people pay big money to get this type of stuff done in their companies. Like, they have a pricing guide for more than 200 at a time. They'll often also do this, get these things, and then look at how you've assembled your team and go, oh, you should be hiring a person with this particular personality type to go into said team. All right, so that's the Belbin team roles. By all means, jump on, have a look at them. Just Google Belbin and you'll be able to find them. Really, really popular. Takeaways from you is A, work out what you are, but also realize that you're going to need to work with all of these different people if you ever want to be successful. So know what your weaknesses are and what you're going to do that's going to piss people off around you, and know the weaknesses of everybody else so that you can not get upset when they go and do those things. Really important to communicate. If you know these types of things, hey, I'm a starter, not a finisher. I'll work really hard on cleaning up after myself, but I'm bad at that, guys. Be forthfront about it. The other thing is to understand your expectations, not just in the Belbin roles, but in general in a team. Are you a 99%er, as in you want to get 99, 100% in everything you do, in a team full of people who are just there to have fun and want a 51% in the pass? Because if that's the team you're in, then that's the team you're in. And you can't force them to do more than they want to do. That is just begging you to get booted and crucified, right? And the same the other way around. If you're in a team of people who want to get 100%, you just want an easy pass, there's going to be some conflict there, and you're probably going to have to pick your game up. if you want to stay in that team. So understanding that, communicating that early so that everybody kind of knows this is where the team sits, right? Super important. The thing I struggle with probably most with the Belbin quizzes, and I've not done the really expensive one, I've only done the cheap ones, is I find the questions they ask me are actually highly situationally dependent. I don't necessarily have enough context to know whether I do whatever particular action. So this is something that I actually find quite important for you to know as well, and I found very important for working in teams, is understanding the situation and the other people around you and then picking the correct role that the team needs. So to do it super simply, are you leading in your team or are you following in your team? So if you're leading, maybe you're the type of person who likes to lead, you're the big, creative, driving forward person, and maybe that's fine. But you should also understand that if other people don't realize that you're trying to lead the team, maybe because they're trying to lead it themselves, you're going to come across as an arrogant, distracted, unfinished mess of a person, right? Could be exactly the same work. It's just, are you fitting correctly into the team? Same deal with people who are following. Dedicated, hardworking implementers. Awesome. Unless everybody in the team is like that, and then maybe you're coming across as somebody who's just a pacifist or doesn't want to be there because you don't have enough scope to do the work that you want to do. The most important thing that I want you to think about right now is how good are you at switching between these two roles? Can you do both? Because you're going to need to. You're going to walk into a meeting with your boss and your boss's boss, and they're going to say, hey, Dylan, this university is going to be switching as much as possible to online because of this coronavirus thing. Change your course into an online course as soon as you possibly can and depopulate the campus for me. And I am sitting there going, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, of course. How can I help you? I'll do what, yep, you want me to do that? Great, I'll get that done. I walk out of that room, I walk into a room of all of my other tutors, and I've instantly changed from very much a follower into very much a leader. We're doing this, you do this, you do this, I'm going to do this, this is how we're going to shape it up. Yeah? You need to be able to do both. And if you're naturally good at one, maybe it's time to start practicing the other one a little bit more. Okay, so that's one side of it. That's the Belbin side of it and that way of thinking about team roles. There's another one that's really popular as well. Oh, sorry, slightly out. That's going to be the next slide. Quick aside, if you were sitting there going, we've not thought about any of this. I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have leaders, and we don't have this, and we don't have that. We just show up and work on our project. That's perfectly fine. Okay, you don't have to do any of this stuff. And if your team is working well, don't rock the boat. Don't start messing with it if you're making really good progress. I'm telling you these things mainly so in the scenario where things aren't working particularly well, you're having arguments or you're not getting work done, this might be the type of thing that you can come back and go, hey, I see that we're lacking this particular team role or something like that. Maybe I'll need to put my hand up and start doing blah instead, so that we can get through here. So it's mainly just not a thing for you to freak out about if everything's working fine, but a thing that might help you if you have some issues. And maybe next time you set a team up, something to think about. Okay, so don't freak if this is a thing that you're not all over right now, because it will evolve over the semester. Sweet. Okay, so other than the Belbin, this is the other one. The other way of thinking that you would be exposed to is the concept of wearing hats. So the hats thing is really cool because it allows you to take them off and put them on. So you adopt different team roles depending on the situation, and you might adopt one particular role for 12 weeks, but you also might adopt a different role for 20 minutes in the middle of a group meeting for a while. All right, so there's 6 different hats that you can wear in any one team, according to this other line of logic. So The white hat is about information. The red hat is about being emotional. The black hat is, I would call it being the devil's advocate, but they put it a bit more nicely, being practical or realistic. Yellow's an optimistic hat, green's creativity, and your management hat is blue, right? So 6 different hats, and you can wear any one of them. This is cool because depending on where you are up to in a process, you're going to want to wear different hats. So if you're doing something like an engineering design process, you might be in your initial ideas stage. What way in which should you be thinking? So it says basically you want to start, and every one of these is going to start and end with a blue hat, a management hat. But you want to fill your room with green, creative thinkers, and white, information data gatherers, right? So that's your analyze the problem and come up with creative solutions. Cool. Once you've done that part, you want to swap to your culling down of your ideas, and you will start to go more black and red hats here in terms of, look for weaknesses and poke difficulties and stuff like that. So you can do these things yourself. Just swap between the different hats for the different scenarios, yeah? And this can be really, really effective. You'll see this a lot. The main ones that I take away are definitely yellow hats and black hats. So it's important generally, if you're ever going to put a black hat on, to openly tell your team that that's what you're doing. And maybe if you're doing that, it'd be a good idea for somebody else to put a yellow hat on, such that you can kind of get this conflict. Same deal with red and white hats. If you don't know this and some person's wearing a red hat and some person's wearing a white hat, one's trying to be emotional, one's trying to be clinical, you're going to get people butting heads and not understanding why. So really good way of helping work through a team. We can also do some things a little bit more practically. So those 2 systems that I've spoken about are very high level. You could also just have a crack at just assigning team roles can really help as well. So try some of that other stuff out, but really practically in 1500, you can do task-orientated teamwork as well, which is you nominate one person to be your communications person, and they are in charge of communications. You nominate one person to be your people person or your project management person. This highly overlaps with the stuff that we were just talking about, right? A project manager is somebody who wears a blue hat a lot, or they were the shaper in the Belbin team roles. Like, it's all very similar. It just helps some people to be able to sometimes put a task-orientated description on things. Particularly if you're going to be meeting up at somebody's house to do this course, you're probably going to want to nominate a host, right? So that's a non-negligible amount of work for you to do. And maybe they need to get given that as a role, which is slightly different to their technical role. You might go, okay, you don't do quite as much technical stuff because you're going to be hosting the people at your home. All right, cool. It's also a good idea to think through rotation of roles. So you probably don't want to have one person be the host absolutely every week, and you certainly don't want to only ever have one person be your comms person. Everybody needs to learn how to be good at that. Because if you don't know how to do that role, you're going to really suffer. So I don't care how much you hate it, you should definitely have a go at it. Everybody, regardless of how you break your team up, you still need to be aware of what other people are doing. It's not that you just get to never worry about that. It's just that you will be a specialist at one other thing. Okay, cool. We're getting towards the end here. I've got a couple of little asides and then a final point to make. So, high-performing teams, super important. To sum up everything that we've really spoken about here, if you want to build a high-performing team, you build this pyramid. It has 4 tiers to it to get to good results. So, what do you think is the fundamental thing. What is the baseline? What is every single good team ever built on a foundation of? What? What do you reckon it is? Give you 5 seconds. Think it through. 3, 2, 1. Trust. It's actually trust. And this surprises a lot of people because they think it's some practical thing like having a rigid structure or communication or something like that. It's not. It's trust. If you don't feel safe within your team, if you don't feel that you can trust the rest of them, if you don't feel that they've got your back, and if you don't feel that you've got theirs, you will never be successful. Trust is the #1 most important thing in making a good team. And it's often neglected. You will see a lot of people, when they first assemble a team, they do a trust exercise to try and start this. They often execute it fairly poorly, but they do try. But a lot of the time, people don't monitor the trust of their team anywhere near as much as they should. So you get that sorted first. You be a person who can be trusted, and you offer trust to the other people in your team before you try and even think about achieving goals. Okay? So the next one's conflict. If you want to be successful, you've got to be able to have conflict in your team. You've got to be able to know two of you have a differing opinion, and you've got to have a good way of decking that out such that you can work out what the correct answer is. When you go through and you do a design process, and I think we should do it this way, but somebody else thinks we should do it that way, you've got to be able to voice your opinions. You've got to be able to work through that conflict successfully. You can't do that without the trust. The conflict pushes you. The conflict is what pushes you to be better and better and better every time. So you're not going to ever get better without conflict, but you're not going to be good at conflict without trust. Okay? So you shouldn't be worried if your team has conflict within it. You should only be worried if it's bad at handling that. Okay, the next two kind of go hand in hand, commitment and accountability. So we've sort of touched on bits and pieces of this already, actually. Are you personally committed to this team? And how committed is everybody else to this team? And then if you are committed, will you be accountable both for yourself and for the team as a whole? So if you say you're going to get something done, are you committed to getting it done on budget, on time, at an acceptable level? And will you willingly put your hand up when it's not good enough and say, yep, that was me, that was my bad, I'm going to pull double time to get this fixed by the time we need it to be fixed by? The other side of it, to be accountable for that's to be accountable for yourself. To be accountable for the team is to say to a client or somebody, yep, we'll get that fixed. Even though it wasn't your fault in any way. Somebody else in your team might have messed up. Doesn't matter. You're still accountable for the whole team, right? So commitment and accountability. There's really small things that you can do right to be good here. Or really small things that you can get wrong that eat away at your accountability, and then they eat away at your trust. So it's not being on time, and your team gets chewed out because you were 5 minutes late. That really begins to eat away at the trust, and it totally eats away at your accountability. You want to be high performing. What you want is to get put in a high pressure scenario where you've got to get several things done, and you can break that up. Give one to John, and John, this really needs to get done. They're on that, so you can focus on something else. And when it comes up, yeah, but what if John doesn't get it done? You can turn around and go, no. He is a man of, what is it? Trust, confidence, and sheer will. Focus, confidence, and sheer will. That's going to get finished. I can count on that because I trust him. I'm going to finish this, and he can trust me. And then we're going to be able to come together. Yeah. So that's what you're aiming for, to be a high performing team. Awesome. So if you wanted a whole lecture summed up in one slide, that's it right there. Make sure you're on top of that. So for the asides, I've talked about how conflict is a good thing, and it is, as long as it is pushing you forward to be better. When you're debating because it's fun, I get that it's fun. You gotta be able to put a pin in it and go, you know what, this doesn't actually help us improve each week. And yes, we didn't necessarily get a final answer to this, but we're going to just stop and move on regardless. Okay, so don't get caught going down the rabbit hole. The other one is this type of conflict often works really, really well in a team of people who are willing to learn and listen to change. If you're not in that scenario, i.e. the comment section on YouTube, just leave it, let it go, put it down, walk away, okay? Because there's no point. All right, so this is basically my final takeaway for you from here, is it is far more important that your team is all working together towards a goal than what that goal actually is. What I mean by that is there's going to be 10 different solutions to your problem. And some might be a couple % better than the others, and you're going to have to pick one, and maybe you don't necessarily agree with the one that the rest of your team picked, but it doesn't matter, okay? Once you've picked one, get on board, go hard at it, and you're going to be far more successful with everybody pushing in the same direction than pulling in all different directions. The idea here is, doesn't matter how smart you are as an individual, the good team of players beats the team of good players, yeah? Doesn't mean you fold instantly, doesn't mean you don't have conflict, but it does mean once a decision gets made, whether you agree with it or not, you get on board. All right, here's my sporting analogy, because of course I've got one. This is a scrum. This is in rugby union, not rugby league, because they're actually pushing. If you've never seen one, it's a bunch of guys get together, they push against each other as hard as they can, and they roll the ball into the middle, and if you're strong enough to push the other team backwards, you get the ball. It's a really important part of the game, and a fair few scientific studies have been published on the scrum and the most efficient way of doing it. So this is some data from a study. What it looks at is they got 7 different teams, and they checked how strong these teams could push in a scrum, and they also got the team members out individually and looked at how strong they could push. So, see if we can get my mouse. Yeah, here we go. If you take the strongest pushing scrum, so this was as a team, these people could push this hard, this many newtons, 9,000 newtons. And then you compare it to how strong all of the individuals were at pushing, you'll find that this was the strongest pack of 8 individuals, and they had the strongest scrum. Which totally makes sense, right? You took all the strongest 8 individuals, they were the strongest altogether. That makes a lot of sense. Except, no, it doesn't. The second strongest bunch of individuals is here, right down the bottom of the list. So really strong individuals, really weak scrum, because they weren't all pushing together. They don't coordinate their push as well. The next strongest pack of individuals here, yeah, right? So these were right down the bottom. Really strong individuals, poor scrum. Even this was the weakest group of individuals, and they're 4th on the list. They're not doing that badly. The thing to highlight here is you work together. It's far more important than how strong you are as an individual. The other observation you may wish to make here, and it's semi-valid, is they were actually, their sum of individual forces was always higher than their average when they pushed together. So you would argue they all effectively got weaker in the scrum, and it's not untrue. This is what they'll often say a lot in when people talk about teamwork. They'll say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go in a team. 10,000 newtons is about the same equivalent as a ton of force when you work that out. So getting hit by a scrum is literally a ton of bricks. It's the same force, right? That's a ton of bricks hitting you. That would kill an individual. Legitimately is enough force to kill an individual, to crush you. So yeah, you might have all been stronger as individuals, but each one of you would die in the face of that scrum. So you push together, you trust each other, you work as a team. Cool. I may be stretching the sports analogy a little farther. Anyway, recap on teamwork. Number 1, multiple personalities are a good thing in a team. They're meant to be there. That can cause some conflict, which again is a good thing. if it's well managed. So managing your teams, super important. You can't manage them if you don't know anything about them. You want to know what you are, you want to know what you're good at, and you want to know what you're bad at if you want to be a good team member. Then you need to understand what your particular role is that day in that team so you can play it as well as possible. You work for your team, you will be successful. I guarantee it. Awesome. That's it for this part of the lecture. More parts will be coming out. Just keep watching the YouTube channel. I'll send you some links.